Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be my recent reads, as the title suggests. I'm going to be talking to you about the books that I've read recently. This is not necessarily a monthly wrap-up because it's not yet the end of the month, but I wanted to just chat to you about these books. I'm going to be talking about 4 books today, but one of them, aka The Night Circus, I'm still busy reading. I started reading this just a little bit ago. I'm on page, and by a little bit I mean a couple of days. I'm on page 47 so far. I haven't read a lot yet, but I am enjoying what I'm reading so far. So I'm glad that I'm actually finally getting around to reading this one now. After owning it for 6 years, I'm finally reading this book. And then the next 3 books are also, they're all pretty short books, and I got through them pretty quickly. I think I read all of these. I've read all of these in this month. I don't think I started any of them before June. First up is Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers. This is a murder mystery and set in 1920s London, and it is a lord who has a lot of time on his hands and nothing to do with that time, who likes to investigate crimes as a kind of private detective or private investigator. But nobody's asking him to do this. He's just doing it because he has nothing else to do with his time, essentially. And he's very eccentric and a very interesting character, and he's friends with a policeman or a detective of some kind who is a legal investigator of these crimes, as in he's on the police force. And they sort of work together to solve these crimes because obviously the Lord can do, it sounds like I'm saying the Lord as in the Lord, but no. Lord Peter is his name. He can obviously go and ask questions where the policeman can't because it's not technically part of his investigation, and vice versa. So they make a great team, actually, and they eventually solve the crime, or there's 2 crimes. And they eventually solve both of them, and it was a really fun book. Some of Lord Peter's dialogue is really confusing sometimes, but I think that's just because of how eccentric he is, and he's just that kind of character. So I enjoyed this book quite a lot. I haven't heard of Dorothy L. Sayers before I saw this book, and I've not read any of her other works. I don't know whether I would read any of her other works. I don't know that I liked this book that much, but if I find another book of hers somewhere in the future and it intrigues me, I might pick it up. I think I gave this book a 4-star rating, so I didn't dislike it, but if all of her characters are the way that this Lord Peter is, I don't know that I would enjoy reading multiple of her works, if you understand what I'm saying. Okay, then moving on. The next thing I read was Felicity by Mary Oliver, which is a poetry collection, and I fairly enjoyed this book. I think I also gave it a 4-star rating. It was interesting, but I didn't like all of the poems, which is fine, and it's to be expected in a poetry collection. If you do like all of the poems in a poetry collection, then I don't know what that says about you, but I have never found a single poetry collection where I like every single one of the poems, so I think that's just normal. Different poems resonate with different people at different times of their lives. But I did want to read you some of the poetry because I do think it is a very good collection, and I would like people to go and pick it up, maybe. I dog-eared quite a few poems in this book, as you can maybe see. And some of them I dog-eared because I like the entire poem, and some of them I just dog-eared because I really like a certain line. I will read to you the poem called Roses. I think this is one of my favorites from this collection. So, here we go. Everyone now and again wonders about those questions that have no ready answers. First cause, God's existence. What happens when the curtain goes down and nothing stops it? Not kissing, not going to the mall, not the Super Bowl. "Wild roses," I said to them one morning. "Do you have the answers? And if you do, would you tell me?" The roses laughed softly. "Forgive us," they said, "but as you can see, we are just now entirely busy being roses." And I really like that poem because I think it sort of reminds us of how much we tend to overthink things as humans. We try and analyze and overanalyze every single aspect of our lives, and we really want to know the answer to all of these really unanswerable questions. And if you look at nature and other animals, you realize that maybe none of that is actually important, and that if you just go about your life being human, as the roses go about their lives just being roses, there's nothing wrong with that, and maybe you might be more content. Maybe I'm overanalyzing the poem, but that's what I got from that poem. And yeah, I really like her poetry. I think I would like to pick up some more collections of hers. Some of her other collections might resonate more with me because I do generally like her style of writing. Let's see if I can find you another poem. Here's another one that's called "I Don't Want to Lose." I don't want to lose a single thread from the intricate brocade of this happiness. I want to remember everything, which is why I'm lying awake, sleepy but not sleepy enough to give up. Just now, a moment from years ago, the early morning light, the deft, sweet gesture of your hand reaching for me. I think her poetry is so beautiful because it's so simple. And I think a lot of poetry is overcomplicated sometimes, and it can be that there's beauty in that complexity, but I also think there's a lot of beauty in a very simple poem. One last poem, and then I will let you go. Okay, I will let us move on to the next one. The last poem I'm going to read to you is called "Storage." When I moved from one house to another, there were many things I had no room for. What does one do? I rented a storage space and filled it. Years passed. Occasionally I went there and looked in, but nothing happened, not a single twinge of the heart. As I grew older, the things I cared about grew fewer, but were more important. So one day I undid the lock and called the trash man. He took everything. I felt like the little donkey when his burden had finally lifted. Things! Burn them, make a beautiful fire. More room in your heart for love, for the trees, for the birds who own nothing, the reason they can fly. So there's some Mary Oliver for you. I hope this has intrigued you to go and pick this collection up, or maybe one of her other collections. And if not, if you're not a poetry person, that's fine too. Next up, I have Food by Gertrude Stein. It's another one of these Penguin modern editions that I've bought a couple of. And let me tell you, first of all, this book would never have been published if Gertrude Stein hadn't written it. If it wasn't her big, her name attached to this, it would never have been published. And also it would never have been published if this was the first thing that she ever wrote, because it is so out there and so against the norm, and it is so completely, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but not understandable, that if it were anybody else, this never would have made it to the publishing press. It never would have made it past the first round of editors. And I will tell you why. I'm just going to read to you a couple of lines from this book, because wow, I even wrote a little note in the front of this book that says, just when you feel you're starting to understand what she's saying, she changes the subject again and you're lost. So if that tells you anything about this collection. It's supposed to be prose pieces about different foods, but it is not at all what you would expect from this. Okay, so here we go. This is from the prose piece, Roast Beef. Anytime there is a surface, there is a surface, and every time there is a suggestion, there is a suggestion, and every time there is silence, and every time that is languid, There is that there then and not oftener, not always, not particular, tender and changing and external and central and surrounded and singular and simple and the same and the surface and the circle and the shine and the sucre and the white and the same and the better and the red and the same and the center and the yellow and the tender and the better and all together. Now, if you think that has anything to do with roast beef, please explain this to me, because I could make no sense. Could make absolutely no sense of most of what is in this collection. But also, there are sections in her writing that are so beautiful, that would work so beautifully as poems, if she had just separated them from the rest of whatever she's trying to say here and wrote it as a poem. For instance, this is also from Roast Beef, just a page later. It says, lovely snipe and tender turn, excellent vapor and slender butter, all the splinter and all the trunk, all the poisonous darkening drunk, all the joy in weak success, and all the joyful tenderness, all the section and the tea, all the stouter symmetry. And that, to me, obviously it's probably just because it rhymes, but that could be a genuinely good poem. I don't know what it would be about, but it sounds nice to the ear. But yes, overall, no idea what was happening in this collection. Do I want to read any of Gertrude Stein's other works if it's like this? No, I really don't. But I do think that her other work is maybe a little bit more understandable. When I read this, the first thing I thought was that she went on a massive acid trip and just wrote down every single thought that came to her mind as it came to her mind, and that's why none of it is coherent. And you can understand nothing of it because in her tripping state, it made sense to her, but then in her sober mind, it makes no sense. Or in my sober mind, at least. I mean, if you want to read something very avant-garde and that will make you laugh because it is so ridiculous, maybe pick this up. It wasn't that expensive when I bought it, so I'm not regretful of having bought this, especially because now I have had a taste of Gertrude Stein's mind, and I can maybe make a more informed decision about whether I would like to read any of her other works, as opposed to just going in blindly to a larger work and then discovering that it is like this, and then regretting all of my life decisions. But there you have it. It's a very quick and dirty description of the books that I've read recently and the one that I'm currently reading. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for being here. I will see you again next week with another video. Cheers.